When I moved into the quiet suburban cul-de-sac of Maple Hill last summer, I never imagined that within a year, I'd be standing in the middle of my neighbor's living room at a party, utterly shocked by what their teenage son had just done. It started off like any ordinary Saturday evening, a summer block party where every neighbor on the street showed up with a casserole or a cold drink and the shared intention of pretending life was perfect, at least for a few hours. I'd gotten to know most of the families on our street, but the Harrisons were particularly easy to like. Jack and Laura Harrison were the kind of couple who never missed a neighborhood meeting or forgot a birthday. Their house always smelled like cookies or pinewood cleaner, and their backyard had a white gazebo that looked like something out of a wedding magazine. They had 2 children, the youngest being Ryan, a 17-year-old high school senior who kept mostly to himself. Ryan wasn't the kind of kid who made waves. He mowed his parents' lawn without being asked, said yes, and no, sir with a politeness that almost felt outdated, and was always lugging around a backpack full of books. In a neighborhood full of loud, social teens, Ryan was the quiet one, a bit of a mystery even to those who'd lived next door to him for years. He was always polite, but distant, one of those kids you assume is either brilliant or just shy. Either way, no one expected much drama from Ryan. So when Laura Harrison sent out invites to their annual summer bash, no one anticipated that her son would be the one who left everyone speechless. That evening, the Harrisons had gone all out. Strings of warm lights crisscrossed the backyard, paper lanterns swayed with the breeze, and an impressive spread of homemade food sat on folding tables covered with checkered cloth. Someone had set up speakers and was playing a playlist full of oldies and early 2000s hits. People were chatting, laughing, and enjoying cold drinks while the kids splashed in the pool. I brought my famous buffalo chicken dip and a 6-pack of soda, exchanging smiles with the neighbors as I set them down on the table. Laura greeted me warmly and ushered me into the conversation circle where she, my across-the-street neighbor Kathy, and a few others were sipping sangria and swapping stories about bad haircuts and ridiculous HOA rules. Ryan was sitting near the pool, scrolling through his phone and sipping a soda. He looked up occasionally, acknowledging guests with a nod or a quiet hey, but mostly kept to himself. A few kids his age were gathered near the corner, playing cornhole and laughing too loudly. Ryan didn't join them. As the sun dipped lower, and the backyard lights became more prominent, Jack clinked his glass and announced it was time for the fun part of the evening, which usually meant some casual karaoke. The adults chuckled and groaned, and a few brave souls immediately signed up to belt out classics. Kathy did a rousing version of Sweet Caroline, and our neighbor Greg performed a comically bad but enthusiastic Living on a Prayer. Everyone was in a good mood, swaying and singing along. Then, about an hour in, just as someone started queuing up a country duet, Ryan quietly walked over to the microphone. At first, no one noticed. He cleared his throat and tapped the mic, and only then did the crowd hush. Laura looked surprised, pleasantly so, but surprised nonetheless. I saw her whisper something to Jack, who raised his eyebrows and shrugged. No one could recall Ryan ever singing at one of these parties. Heck, most of us had never heard him speak more than a few sentences at a time. "What's up, everyone?" Ryan said, his voice steady but soft. "I wrote a little something. Hope that's okay." And then he pulled a folded sheet of paper from his pocket, glanced down at it, and began to speak. But it wasn't karaoke. It was a poem. A spoken word performance. The moment he began, the atmosphere shifted. The music had stopped, people had lowered their drinks, and the kids near the pool even turned off their phones. His voice, once quiet and reserved, now rang with strength and emotion. His poem was about the pressure of growing up in a neighborhood full of smiling faces but secret struggles. He spoke about expectations, about the loneliness of being the good kid who no one really saw. He spoke about the anxiety that gnawed at him late at night, and the fear of not being enough no matter how hard he tried. There wasn't a single person in the yard who wasn't riveted. He talked about his dreams, about wanting to be a writer, about the journals under his bed filled with stories no one would ever read. He mentioned how he sometimes walked around at night just to feel something different, to imagine a world outside of Maple Hill, one where he wasn't just Jack and Laura's quiet kid. It was raw, vulnerable, honest. By the time he finished, there was silence. Heavy, stunned silence. And then, applause. Loud, Thunderous, genuine applause. Some people stood. Some whistled. Laura had tears in her eyes, and Jack was blinking hard, trying to hold his own back. I looked around and saw Kathy placing a hand over her heart. Even the usually snarky teens looked moved, some clapping slower, as if unsure how to respond to something that had hit them unexpectedly deep. Ryan stepped back from the mic, gave a small smile, and returned to his seat near the pool without another word. He didn't bask in the applause or make a show of it. He simply sat down, picked up his soda, and took a sip. That moment changed everything. People didn't quite know what to do next. A couple of awkward jokes were made. Someone turned the music back on, but for a while, the party had lost some of its fluff. Not in a bad way, more like something meaningful had just occurred, and everyone was still processing it. Later, as the crowd started thinning out, I found myself standing next to Ryan by the snack table. I wasn't sure what to say, so I simply offered him one of the last mini cheesecakes. "You okay?" I asked. He shrugged. "Yeah. Just figured it was time." That was really powerful. He looked down, almost embarrassed, then smiled faintly. "Thanks." After that night, Ryan wasn't just the quiet kid anymore. Neighbors started treating him differently, not out of pity, but respect. Some of the other teens started inviting him to things. Laura told me later that he'd been accepted into a summer writing program he hadn't told anyone about yet. He wanted to prove to himself that he could be seen, she said. And he was. We all saw him that night, truly saw him, for the first time. The Harrisons' party became known not for the sangria or the karaoke, but for the night Ryan spoke his truth. For once, a suburban gathering wasn't about small talk or casseroles, but about one young man's bravery to let people in. It reminded us all that sometimes, the quietest person in the room has the most important story to tell. And all it takes is one moment, one unexpected act of honesty, to catch everyone off guard and leave them forever changed.